When we measure a tree, we usually use a DBH tape, or there are a few other devices that you can use to measure the diameter at breast height, the DBH, and we also measure the height. A clinometer is a very typical tool. There are some more advanced tools that use lasers, for example, that we can use. So those are what we're measuring for an individual tree. That allows us to get the diameter, the basal area, and the height of that tree. But then we need to figure out how to scale that up to the stand level. And there's a couple of different approaches, and we branch pretty quickly off into statistics. So the most simplest and kind of naive approach is just say, let's just measure every single tree in the forest. Let's get this really precise. So statistically, we refer to that as a census, where you measure every single thing. We might also call it a complete inventory of a forest. And this is done occasionally, especially in the research context, where you want to have very detailed measurements of growth for individual trees over time. So often you would measure every single tree in a stand and then repeat those measurements over intervals. But you can imagine that's really time consuming. And if you are measuring a stand for a timber harvest or to plant a thinning, you don't necessarily have to measure every tree to get the information that you want. So thinking from a statistical perspective again, if we think about all the trees in the forest, that's our population. All of the trees in that forest stand that we're trying to make some decision about or think about. If we measure every single tree in the population, that's a census. But instead what we can do is measure a sample. That's where we, through some sort of methodology, we pick certain trees to measure. So we only measure a small proportion of the trees. We do our analysis on those trees, and then we extrapolate to the full stand. So we measure a small group of trees, calculate their basal area, calculate their height, or measure their basal area, measure their height, measure their volume, and then from that we extrapolate to get maybe average height of trees in the stand, total volume of the stand in cubic meters per hectare, basal area in square meters per hectare. So by measuring a subsample, our results might be a little bit less precise or a little bit less accurate than if we had measured every single tree in the stand. But we're still going to get pretty close if we use a good sampling method, and we're going to spend a lot less time doing it. So that's pretty important. There are many different ways to sample forests, and different methods have different strengths and weaknesses. I'm going to talk about two broad classes of measurements. The first is a fixed area plot. A fixed area plot is where we say, okay, I'm going to determine the locations of a certain number of plots in my forest. Based on some prior knowledge about that forest, I'm going to come up with an idea about how many plots I think I need to measure. Maybe in a 20 hectare forest, I'm going to say I want to measure 10 plots, for example. So in a very variable forest, you might need to measure more plots. In a very homogeneous forest, you might not need to measure as many. And then that fixed area plot means that the area of your sampling plot is fixed and precise. And it can be in the shape of a square. Often we use a circle because that's a little bit easier to measure in the field. And we use a defined area for that plot. So really common plot sizes are a 1/50th hectare plot or a 1/100th hectare plot. So let's imagine we have a 1/50th hectare plot. And we measure our basal area for the individual trees, all of the trees in that plot. We add up that basal area. So now we know how many square meters of basal area we have in that plot. And that plot is 1/50th of a hectare. So to scale that up, we can simply multiply our total basal area for that plot by 50 to get our basal area in square meters per hectare for the whole stand. And obviously one sample isn't enough, or one plot isn't enough. So if we measure many plots and take averages across those plots, we can get a pretty good estimate of what the basal area is for that stand.